We put a bow on the week that was against the Dallas Cowboys and then shift our focus to the New Orleans Saints. Then Evan is going to drop his predictions for week 2 in the Superdome. Let's go.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome to the Locked On Bucs Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. And for those of you with a Roku or an Amazon stick, we are available on 10 Tampa Bay Plus over on those platforms. So make sure you check us out there if you feel so inclined. Of course, I am James Yarcho, joined by my Wednesday co-host, one Mr. Evan Klosky of said 10 Tampa Bay. You can check out everything he's doing over there and at 10tampabay.com. Check out my work at SBNationsBucksNation.com. And, of course, make sure you're following everything on Twitter at LockedOnBucks, at JYarcho_Bucks. Check out David over at DHarrison82. And, of course, at E. Klosky, WTSP. Again, we thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. All right, it is the midway point of the week. It is time to put a nice, tidy little bow on the week that was, because Evan, this is your first opportunity on the show to talk about what you saw Sunday night in the win against the Dallas Cowboys before we turn the page and flip it over to the divisional matchup against the New Orleans Saints. So the Bucs come away with a, successful 19-3 victory, but it wasn't all pretty on the offensive side of the ball. But tell everybody what your thoughts were on the game.
Yeah, I rolled back, put it on Twitter, because I said entering that game, and I said entering the season, that the defense is going to be more of a talking point at the beginning of the year than the offense. And that is exactly what happened. This unit, which is in its fourth year under Todd Bowles, is executing at a high level. They're in midseason form because they've been in this system. It's a complicated system nonetheless. So having more players who are familiar with it is only going to make this group even more dangerous. I mentioned on the last podcast that Bowles, the first year he came in, held opponents to less than 20 points 3 times. That went up from 3 to 6, 6 to 8. So that's the trajectory that this unit is on. I was able to talk with Richard Sherman earlier this week, and he said what makes this defense so dang hard is the versatility and the fact that the Buccaneers will go game to game with their matchup. They are not like, hey, this is our foundation. This is what we do, and this is what we're going to do every week. Nuh-uh. Bowles even said that they didn't even have to break out anything special against the Cowboys in his Monday press conference. He pretty much said, look, we had something that was working. Why mess it up? So the fact is, we didn't see like Sean Murphy-Bunting or Keanu Neal on Sunday night. But that does not mean that you're not going to see Sean Murphy-Bunting in some of these games play heavy snaps when they, get out of a nickel sort of look and they want to put the extra cornerback in there. So there are things that you're going to see throughout the season, and not to mention guys like Keanu and Sean Murphy-Bunting are still waiting there in the wings in case an injury happens. So we all saw what happened last year when the depth got depleted. This team learned from it, and they have built at least something there. The offensive line is a little bit different. I don't think that they can withstand everything that's happening on that route. But nonetheless, you have to be stoked about what the defense is doing. I do not think that's a fluke, even though people are hammering about how bad the Dallas Cowboys offense was. And believe me, it was. I do think that you need to give credit to the Buccaneers and that unit. Devin White looking like himself. Antoine Winfield Jr., I think his role this year is in direct correlation to how they lost against the Rams and beating a guy like Cooper Kupp. They're not going to allow that to happen again. Antoine Winfield Jr., when he is, when the Rams come to town and when you think about some of the guys in the NFC they have to beat to win a Super Bowl, they know they have to go through that squad. Winfield Jr. is going to be ready to handle that role with what he's doing, and he was bouncing around everywhere on that field. So just gushing about the things that I love from the defense and what they were doing to confuse Dallas and how steady they were and how sturdy. Offensively speaking, not as clean, not as fluid. Thank the Lord for Lenny. He was just unbelievable. Everything that we've been talking about in training camp, how I told people, as long as he's healthy, put him into your fantasy lineups, draft him high. He's going to be a beast. You're going to feed the rock. They're going to want to be more balanced. That is exactly what they were. The only problem was they just looked like crap in the red zone. I mean, 4 field goals, a missed field goal, and then also they got the touchdown to Mike Evans, which I think was a run play, which Brady just completely checked out of on the spot and just set up one-on-one with Mike. There it is, which I think they're in sync on that kind of stuff. So let's to be determined on the offense. It certainly hurts not having Chris out there. I expect Russell Gage to be a little bit more involved against New Orleans now that Godwin's not a part of the mechanism here. Also think Julio will be more and more involved. We saw them trying to force him into the offense and find ways with the end arounds and also, the deep bombs. Brady missed him on a couple of passes, to be honest. Brady, when watching it back, was not very sharp.
No.
He that was the main thing. I got NFL Plus this year, so watch out. So the main thing when looking at the tape was really that Brady left a lot out there, I think. I thought his decision-making was actually real good. Outside of the interception, I thought the decisions that he made of who he was supposed to go to, I wasn't questioning any of that stuff, but certainly there were a few passes in there, some splash plays, which I think he just didn't have it. So that will get better, and the offense will get better, but between the O-line communication stuff, I know him and Hainsey weren't on the same page throughout the game. He admitted that on the Let's Go podcast. Mm-hmm. Between the wide receivers shuffling in and out, man, tight end looks like it's a nothing burger. Man, going from Gronk to I know we talk about Gronk enough, but what you saw in the red zone, not having Gronk there,
it was huge,
monstrous. That is where you miss him. And I think Brady desperately missed the go-to red zone option. And, of course, he got sacked by Parsons on, I think, 2 of those drives in the red zone. Mm-hmm. But he missed his guy. He's got Mikey there on, within the 5, one-on-one, boom, just throw it up. But you felt the loss of Gronk in that offense just to keep the motor running, I think Brady's still figuring out who's my guy. Who do I go to in a pinch? So that was, let's see. I'm not optimistic that it's going to correct itself in New Orleans either. I think this is going to be a slow burn here to figure this out. But again, luckily you have the defense. And shout out to the special teams. I thought Todd Bowles said he was scared, very scared of Turpin. I forget his exact quote, but he was a non-factor. He had all this preseason hype, everything, and they really, they stepped up. And I know that was a big concern for the coaching staff with special teams.
Yeah, and you're 100% right about Gronk, and I was surprised to see Kyle Rudolph was a game day inactive. You brought him in for a reason, and we kind of thought that reason was going to be down there in the red zone. Maybe they could have used him. Maybe we'll see him active against the New Orleans Saints, who we're going to talk about in just a moment. But I get the feeling that I'm going to have to concede how right you were sooner rather than later if things keep up with the red zone ineptitude, and number 87 is going to be rumbling, bumbling, stumbling back out onto that field. All right. We are going to turn the page, though. Buccaneers 1-0. Heading to New Orleans to face the 1-0 Saints in their house for their home opener. But first, As you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs number one in delivering quality hires versus the leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. And it's time to talk about the Saints. That's right. It is indeed Saints week. They had quite the impressive comeback win against the Atlanta Falcons, who I think surprised a lot of people with the way they were playing. Of course, the top storylines coming out of that game is how apparently some tall receiver named Michael Timmis or Thomas, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
He went to
where did he go to school?
Some schluppy community college in Columbus. Yeah, apparently he's back. The defense maybe not quite as tough as people seem to think they were going to be heading into the season. Now, of course, you don't want to overreact to week one, right? We know that the Bengals aren't going to be a turnover factory like they showed in week one. You know that the Green Bay Packers are going to get back on track. So you take a lot of this stuff with a grain of salt in the first week of the season. But, you know, probably one of the biggest things is the fact that Alvin Kamara was dealing with a rib injury that limited his participation essentially in the game. That's why you saw so much Mark Ingram. That's why you saw some of these plays with Diet Tebow. So it's certainly something to monitor moving forward because Alvin Kamara is a big piece of the offense and he tends to always play really well against the Buccaneers. But Evan, go ahead and start to let us know what you saw in the New Orleans Saints and what you're looking for in the week to come.
Well, here's something that I will do. I crunched the numbers, and surprisingly enough, Kamara actually isn't very good against the Buccaneers anyway. He's never rushed for more than 75 yards against the Bucs. But in his last 7 games, and a lot of times that's because he's receiving a ton of yards. Mm-hmm. But he's never had more than 51 receiving yards in the last 7 games against Tampa Bay. Since Bowles has joined the Bucs, here are Kamara's total numbers: 104, 122, 67, 49, 76, 31. That's the regular season. So Bowles knows how to stop that guy. It's certainly a blow to the offense because they still run things through him. It's still something that the Bucs need to work really hard at limiting and stopping. Like, it's not like, oh, they stop him, so everything else is easy. It's like, no, because they stop him, that's why, other things are open. So if you eliminate Kamara, then the Saints are really limited in what they're doing with Ingram. Pretty much you're turning him into a bulldozer north and south, and that plays right into the Bucs' strength. Now, something that Dallas was doing was kind of working the edges of the Bucs line instead of going truly north and south. They kind of split the difference between east and west and north and south, and they started having some success getting a little bit wider outside the A and B gaps. But I think that if he does not play, that would be significant because that would make Todd Bowles and company sleep easy at night, and it would relieve something off the defense's plate that they don't have to worry about. But you mentioned the Saints defense, and right, how many touchdowns? Well, the score was 27-26. How many touchdowns did they give up against the Falcons?
2.
One. They gave up 1 touchdown. So you're telling me an offense who couldn't get into the end zone now has to play a Saints defense that did a very good job of preventing another offense from getting into the end zone. That's a problem. That is going to be a big problem. So you might be stuck in the same situation where the Buccaneers move the ball down the field and then stall. So that is what intrigues me the most about this matchup, because you're right, the Saints bent a lot, but ultimately the second half, they did score 2 touchdowns. I miscounted. They had the Mariota touchdown in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, my bad. Still, the point stands. I think that with the Falcons in the second half and what the Saints were doing defensively, they really kind of course corrected. Also, the Saints offensively, I think, is really the bigger story. They had 385 yards of offense. It didn't start clicking there till the second half with some adjustments. So what I want to see is really, truly, it's Jameis Winston versus the Bucs defense. You want to talk about what is going to decide this game? It is the Saints offense versus the Bucs defense, because I think the Buccaneers will do what they got to do to have some sort of success. But for some unearthly reason, Tom Brady sucks against this team. I don't know why.
It goes back to his New England days, too. It's not just all of a sudden.
There are 2 teams in the National Football League that have a winning record against Tom Brady in the regular season: New Orleans and the Seattle Seahawks. And he's 1-2 against the Seahawks. He's 4-5 against the Saints. Just a larger sample size there. So when you think about Sean Payton not being there anymore, that affects the offense, right? So to me, that is like Bowles and Sean Payton to me are like alpha and alpha in their fields, right? I think Todd Bowles is one of the best defensive minds. I think Sean Payton's one of the best offensive minds. And you had alpha versus alpha going at it. And that created some really tough matchups for the Bucs, because usually they have the mind advantage, the scheme advantage over other teams with Bowles in the saddle. Now they will. But defensively speaking, their problems are still going to be there. Like their unit, their guys are still mostly back from last year. And some pieces are shuffled. You got Tyrann Mathieu there as well. So that it is going to be a battle. I certainly, I tip my cap to the Falcons. I watched that game, and I think Arthur Smith is a cool offensive mind as well. I think he's doing interesting things with Marcus Mariota and Cordell Patterson. It's very gadgety. It's different. I don't know about their wide receivers. Like, I love Drake London and I love Kyle Pitts. Who knows when they start clicking, but they don't really have other options. So once you figure out the gadgets, then they're kind of done. They're kind of stuck, and their defense, I don't know, is sustainable for a whole game. So that's my Falcons piece. But yeah, overall, in my assessment of the Saints and what I saw, you're going to get a good battle. I know the Saints, the score and the situation didn't really. It almost resulted in a loss for them, but I wouldn't read too much into that. Going right back to your week 1 rant.
Yeah, the last time this team got a regular season win in New Orleans, you got to go back to the Ryan Fitzpatrick, Deshaun Jackson offensive explosion in week 1 back in 2018.
The 48-40 thriller, yeah. Another week 1 situation, right, where the Buccaneers win and you have your overreactions, and then that team turned out the way that I was going to turn out.
I mean, yeah, they started off, was it 2-0 or 3-0?
Yeah. We had Fitzmagic season here. It was great.
Yeah, and then Chris Conte became a meme on Monday Night Football when he got absolutely just flattened on a stiff arm against the Pittsburgh Steelers. But anyway, I digress. this matchup, I think, is going to say a lot about the Buccaneers, and I'll get into it a little bit more on Friday when I reunite with David. Of course, he's got the crossover with Ross Jackson coming up on tomorrow's episode. But you saw during the offseason, right before training camp, and Devin White talking about how they can't seem to find a way to beat the Rams, and they've had their issues with the Saints. It's going to say a lot about the growth and maturity of this team to go in there and get a win against a team that they can't seem to figure out how to beat. It's going to say a lot about Todd Bowles' preparation in getting ready for this game. And even Tom Brady on his Let's Go podcast said, you can't even call this a rivalry because we can't beat them. We haven't been able to figure out a way to do it. Of course, they did it in the most important of the Brady era matchups, but for whatever reason, they seem to just play their worst games against the New Orleans Saints. So it's going to be a tough game to gauge. It's going to be a tough game to figure out. And obviously you hope the Buccaneers can get things off to a 2-0 start, but we're going to hear about your thoughts on the game coming up in just a moment, as far as your bold prediction, your score prediction, and who you think the player of the game is going to be. And if you want to take that advice and parlay it into a little cash for yourself,
little green Skittles,
of course, you can head over to our friends at betonline.net. It's your number one source for all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports information this season. Find all of the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts. BetOnline is also your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores, with odds like the Buccaneers being 3-point favorites this Sunday, or Tampa Bay sitting at plus 158 on whether or not they score on their first drive. All that, of course, can be found at BetOnline, the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including the MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Wrapping things up here on a WTSP Wednesday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast, and it is time for Evan to give some predictions. Of course, David and my predictions will be coming on the Friday episode. And if you want to partake, of course, I will drop that information on how to give your predictions at the end of the show. But Evan, let's start off with the bold prediction for this game. I'm interested to hear what you come up with.
Bold prediction, 3 turnovers by the defense. I think that the defense is going to be lights out again. They should have had 3 against Dallas. And, I think Devin White dropped an interception. Then there was that one in between Lavonte and Shaq Barrett. Their goal is 30 turnovers, and I think they're going to hit that this year. So I'm going with 3 takeaways from the Bucs defense on Jameis Winston, who loves to throw an interception or 2. We know that.
Yeah, I mean, my bold was 5 sacks and 2 takeaways in week 1. This close, Evan. So obviously I'm one minus here, 1 plus there. Yeah,
like just 1 minus off both. You would need it.
But let's go ahead and take a look at who you think who you think the player of the game is going to be.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Lavonte David. I almost went Jamel Dean here, almost. But I think Lavonte David, it just seems like this team knows they suck against the Saints. Lavonte is the leader of that defense. I think nobody is more pissed in that locker room about losing to the Saints so many times than Lavonte David. So I see him, who looked phenomenal in week 1, by the way. The Lavonte that we all know and love, just, the speed, dropping into coverage, just everything about it fell in love with. I think he's going to make his presence known. Devin White had the big game in week 1, 2 sacks. I think Lavonte could come up with a turnover, maybe a fumble, 4/fumble recovery, a sack, and maybe lead the team in tackles, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love that pick, and I think you're right. I don't think there's anybody in the locker room that is more sick of the New Orleans Saints than Lavonte David, because he's been dealing with it for years, and even with a good team, he still can't seem to figure out, what they have to do to stop him. And you go back to last year, and Jameis Winston was having an outstanding game against this Bucs defense, and then he gets injured, and you still can't beat. I don't even remember who the backup was. Trevor Siemian came in that game, and then didn't Taysom Hill get the start in the second game?
Second game, yes, and yeah, he was atrocious. But luckily, the Bucs had the Bucs had nobody on offense. I mean, that was the Godwin.
Godwin got hurt.
Game. Lenny Evans left the game. Lenny left the game. So literally, you had all three of your offensive studs leave. And by the end of that contest, I believe Brady was working with like Darden, Scotty Miller, and Tyler Johnson.
Yeah, because that was the game where Gronk returned, and he returned a little too early and was basically a non-factor.
Well, he returned. He returned that game in New Orleans. Yeah.
Was it in New Orleans?
It was in New Orleans.
Okay.
The game that he returned, and that was he. I don't even think he logged a catch. I mean, he did log. He logged a target. He was. It was like.
It was. Yeah.
He logged 10 to 12 plays, and it was just they cut him off.
It was disaster everywhere, both times. But
yeah, I mean, at least Brady last year threw for 375 yards and 4 touchdowns. It was the 2 interceptions. It was the turnovers that screwed them. They made that comeback. They had that awful. They entered halftime trailing. 16-7, and then I believe they closed that gap, and Brady threw the pick 6 and then looked awful at the last. I don't know. He just fell apart there. That was the Cyril Grayson come-out game. But also, last year they had your leading receivers, Chris Godwin, 8 receptions, 140 yards, and a touchdown. Mm-hmm. Second leading receiver, Tyler Johnson, 5 receptions, 65 yards. Mike Evans, 248 and a tutty. That's this. You have always with Mike Evans, you have the Lattimore shadow situation. So
right, Lattimore.
Yeah, so I mean, you just don't know. Another Ohio State great. So there's welcome to the Buckeyes, man. We're everywhere. So I never know exactly how that's going to go. I think if I remember correctly, Tom Brady, when assessing that game, he pretty much hated himself for ruling out Mike so many times in that game because he was getting shadowed. So we might rectify that this time around. I'm pretty sure he mentioned that on his podcast, that he felt like he wasn't looking Mike's way just because of the shadow, and that Mike was actually open a lot more than he thought. So Mike Evans is a sneaky pick this week.
You just don't want to overcompensate and force the ball and then create more problems than there should have been. All right. Well, Evan, is this you've said numerous times leading up to this moment that until the Bucs do it, you're going to pick the Saints to win these games. So are you sticking with that, or do you have that feeling that this is it, this is the time, and the Buccaneers are going to win?
So I have that feeling that the defense is going to win this game for the Buccaneers, but you best believe I'm picking the Saints to win 20-17. I am not going down with that shit. Nuh-uh. Until the Buccaneers prove to me that they can beat the Saints, I will pick against the Buccaneers every single time. I got fooled last year. I got fooled twice. Shame on you, shame on me. Nuh-uh. I'm picking Saints 20-17, even though it goes against how I think the game's going to go.
It's better to be wrong on that side than be wrong on the other side, where you've convinced yourself that the Bucs are going to win, and you put your name on it, and then all of a sudden it blows up in your face, and you get trolled by the Locked On Saints host and all that.
Ross Jackson's a great guy, but
I love Ross.
He would never do that. Maybe he would. But yeah, again, gut feeling is this is a defensive battle. I think the Buccaneers defense can win in this game. They're going to have to win in this game because I just really do not think that the Bucs offense is going to be able to get motoring at all. And again, I did double check. So the Falcons were 2 of 4 in the red zone against the Saints. So even though they scored twice, they did keep them off the board twice as well because the field goals were actually longer than I thought. So, yeah.
They falconed that game in the most falcony way possible.
Yeah.
It's just
I'm excited to see your prediction.
I'm sorry?
I'm excited to see your prediction.
Yeah, I'm still waffling. I haven't
Well, you always have the Bucs going 17-0, so I'm just
Well, I mean, I think my preseason prediction, I had them 12-5 or 13-4, somewhere in there. But then week to week, I tend to just pick them to win every game because, when I'm wrong, well, that counts as one of the losses that I already gave them earlier. So I don't know. I haven't committed yet. I have to do that soon because David and I have our preview coming up on Friday's episode where we're going to make some of these same predictions with the bolds and the players and the scores. But until then, we want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen or view every day. Now make your second listen the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast. David will be back tomorrow with Ross Jackson of the Locked On Saints podcast, the man who every time I mention Mike Evans responds with who? So he's lucky that he's not doing the show with me, or we would just be hooing back and forth the entire time. If you have any questions or comments or predictions or messages for Mr. Ross Jackson, you, of course, can send those in to lockedonbuckspodcast@gmail.com or leave a voicemail at 813-444-5841. Check out everything that Evan is doing over at 10 Tampa Bay and 10tampabay.com. Check out David's work over at bucksgameday.com. Check out mine at bucksnation.com. Follow on Twitter at LockedOnBucs, at JYarcho_Bucks, at DHarrison82, and at eKlosky WTSP. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire those cannons. And we thank you so much for joining us right here at Locked On Bucs.